Well, it looks like the time has finally come to start building the rack. I've been saying that I'm going to build a rack since before I even got the truck, and I think I'm coming up on a year. It's taken me quite a while to get to where I'm at, but I think it's okay because I pretty much have all the parts now. I've been buying little parts here and there. I've been buying the steel, I've been buying the pumps, I've been buying the lines, I've been buying everything, and I think I officially have pretty much everything I need except for the material, since that is one of those things that I just didn't want to buy it like a year from now and have it get all rusty. So now that I'm actually ready to start doing this, I'm going to start buying the metal. That way it's kind of fresh and it's not super rusty. Now there's a lot of different ways of doing this. This isn't really going to be a how-to series on how to build a rack, since I by no means am a professional and I don't really know what I'm doing. This is my first rack that I'm ever building. I'm just kind of bringing you guys along and hoping that you guys can get some ideas off of what I do. Now, as far as material, I'm going to be using a 1/2 inch thick by 3 inch flat bar for the main structure of it, with some 3/8 angle iron and a couple of other little gussets that I'm going to be building into the frame. But I know there's a couple of guys like Alex from Hoppos that recommends using square tube, and if you think about it, a square tube is actually stronger even if it's a smaller, thinner wall tubing. The only reason why I'm going with a flat plate is because I'm going to be building a 4-stage, which is obviously 4 racks, which is 4 racks thickness. And if I use 1/2 inch, it'll essentially be around 2 inches thick for my rack when the bed is closed. Now, since my truck is super low, I have to be able to mount my pumps up high, so I can't have a thick rack hanging down past the frame, since it's going to cause the pumps and the motors to sit really low. So that's the only reason I'm doing it this way. If not, I would do the square tube method because it honestly is a lot stronger and it does box itself in pretty much. I could probably get away with using 6-inch cylinders, but I figured, you know, I could run an 8-inch cylinder and just not fully extend it, rather than having a 6-inch cylinder and not be able to get what I want because I can't fully extend it, if that makes sense. I will also be telling you guys how much I spent once I finish, because right now I don't want to say how far or how deep I'm into this with all the parts, because I know this is not going to be anywhere near what the finished product is going to be. So just stay updated with the channel, and I'll post how much everything is. But right here, what you're looking at is the 2 first stages. I'm not really going to show this too much because these are basic. Now on the 3rd stage, I'm going to show you guys that a little bit more in detail. I haven't built that one, but I'm going to show you guys that one on camera because that one is a little bit more complicated. This one, what I did is I have 2 pieces of angle iron right here. You can see nothing is welded. I just have it just butted up right now. And this is the 1/2 inch thick by 3-inch flat bar. Right now what I'm working on is the angle iron, which is going to be where the cylinders are mounted. And what I'm doing with this is I'm cutting the angle into where the frame is going to sit. So I'll kind of explain everything as I'm going. Like I said, this is not a how-to video. This is just me kind of showing you how I'm building my rack. Also, one quick thing that I feel like I should mention, just because you guys see me building my rack like this, do not by any means build it the way I'm building it. I would say go out there, do research, look at other racks, see what people are doing and what people are running, and kind of build your own rack and build off of what you like. Just because if you build it the way I like, it's probably going to flex too much, or you're not going to like the way it moves, you're not going to like certain things about it. So I would just say go out there and do your research and look at people and ask them and talk to them about their racks. So if you're thinking of building one, I would say just do your research, or if you're going to have someone build it, just do your research and have them know exactly what you want. And that's pretty much what I did. Is I went to a bunch of shows, since I go to shows pretty much every weekend, and I talked to a bunch of people and I looked at the racks, and thankfully they were nice enough to let me look at the racks and show me all the ins and outs and pros and cons. So with all that, I kind of just gained a bunch of knowledge on what's bad and what's good. And not that something's bad or something's better, it's just different designs. And with all the setups I saw, I pretty much took my favorite parts off of every setup, and I'm going to try to build my own setup based on my favorite parts. However, they might not be your favorite parts. So that's why I would say do not copy my rack, do some research, and build your own. So since this is where the cylinders are going to be mounted, this is going to sit flush with the frame. But since we do have the angled portion of the frame is going to sit right about here, the actual truck frame. So what we're going to do is we're going to cut this out. That way this flat top piece can sit on the frame, and then this piece of angle iron can hang down from the frame. But instead of just doing a flat cut like this, I'm going to cut it straight and then probably throw a little bit of an angle. So I measured 2 inches from this line where I have right here. So I measured this line so it would clear the frame, and then from here we're going to go two 2.5 inches out. I'm going to draw a straight line right here, and that's going to be my straight and angled cut. Now the angle doesn't really matter, it just makes it look a lot cleaner than a straight cut. A lot of people do this simply for looks, but I am going to have to cut this little piece out so that this doesn't get hung up on the frame. Perfect example would be this little tripod I got. So this would be the angle iron, and it would be hitting the frame like that, so it wouldn't be able to fully go down. But if you were to notch that little piece out, then it would sit flush and be lower, versus it just sitting up, and then the bed would sit at like a little bit of a tilt all the time. So whenever you do cuts like this in a corner, you always want to drill it out. Now I've had this happen to me, and I've kind of just learned off of all the fabrication I've done on my own. When you cut something straight like this and then cut it right here, you end up having little micro like cracks that go into the cut. So eventually that crack will start to split down whatever way its easiest path is, which since this is angle iron, it would just split this whole front piece off, which is where all the weight of the cylinders are at. So you obviously don't want to have any cracks on there. So what we're going to do is we're going to drill a little pilot hole right here, drill all the way through, so that way when we cut to the round edge, and that way we don't have to have any cracks split open from there. There you go. Now you can see what I was talking about with the little relief cut that I did. So this piece up here is going to get grounded all the way flush with this piece. That way the truck frame can sit right here, and then we're going to clean this little, put a little radius in there. But now we just got to do this to both of the angle irons for the first two racks. Now before I even think of welding, I'm going to bevel all of my corners. What I mean by that is right here you can see this piece is going to get welded to this. This is going to be my main hinge piece, which is going to be on the very far back of the truck. So technically all the weight is going to be on this one. So what I'm going to do is from here roughly to about here, I'm going to grind this to a point on both of these, because if you look at it, it's 1/2 inch material, so it's pretty thick for what we're doing, and it's kind of the standard. But if you were to butt that up like that and you do a weld on here, even if you do a really hot weld, you're not going to get past, you're not going to get towards the middle of it. You're really only going to be laying a weld on the top, which yes, it's strong because you're still melting the two metal pieces together, but ideally what we want is we want the weld to be all the way from the center of this to all the way in the outside. So I might even do 2 passes and then just grind the top one. So at the end of the day, you're not going to see my welds because I'm going to grind them all. Not that I don't like the way my welds look, I just don't like looking at welds. I like smooth looking things. I like a smooth finish. But what we're going to do is we're going to grind this at like a 45 roughly on the top and on the bottom. Same thing over here, top and bottom. So what we're going to have is pretty much a little tip like this, which I'll show you guys right now when I'm done. But it's going to be something like that. So obviously you can see the weld can go in on the bottom right there and on the top, and I can actually penetrate all the way towards the inside. Now we got the first rack all prepped and ready to go. I'm not going to weld it right now since I want to get all of the racks kind of done. But I probably will lay some tacks on here just so I can kind of get a reference, so I can start stacking them on top of each other. But you guys can kind of get an idea of what I was talking about by beveling the edges. So you can see right here, now there is a little channel in there where we can lay some weld. So now if we do our weld right, we do it nice and hot, and we could even do a nice big weld. It'll penetrate all the way to the core, and then if we flip it and do the same on the other side, it will pretty much melt itself from the very center of the material all the way out. And like I said, if we need to do a second pass because the weld isn't high enough, then we can always go on top and weld another bead or two just to get it to be flush. Let me grind that all off and it'll look like there was no weld. But that is one of the most important things when welding something thick. Once we get all the racks welded up, then I'll start to throw in some gussets and some supports. I've seen some people run some straight bars right here. I've seen some people run some cross pieces, which I think the cross pieces might be stronger. The rule of thumb for fabrication is triangles are always the strongest because they kind of box themselves in. If we were to do a diagonal piece like this and another one like that, we'd have 4 triangles, which would be extremely strong. I have 2 5-foot pieces right here. So my 3rd stage and my 4th stage are each going to be 5 foot long, 60 inches. If anyone wants to kind of copy my measurements. So right here I have my 2 stages. This is technically the dump and this is the side. And it looks like it's overlapped because it is. This one, the 2nd stage, is 3 inches longer. This one has 3 inches extra to push this thing 3 inches out, because our cylinders, which pretty much do all the magic, are going to be tucked in here, and that's what's going to help kind of push off of this angle iron. It's going to push the other angle iron down, or technically up. Every rack that has angle iron is going to be 3 inches bigger than the previous rack. Now my advice to you guys would be, if you can get a long piece of metal, it is better. The way I had to get my angle iron, I got 3 pieces of 5 feet long, so I technically got 15 feet total. But as you see, what I cut right there, that leaves me a tiny piece, which I can't really use for another rack. That's pretty much trash. But with that excess that I have there, and if I were to gather up the other 2 pieces that I have left over from these, I could probably get an extra full angle iron for a different rack, whether that be my dad's or a buddy's or something like that. So if you guys can get a long piece, it's better because you waste less. So now those little leftover pieces I have, they're pretty much scrap. I can't really use them for anything. I'll try to use them for something else, some other project, which is fine, but I can't use them for another rack. I move this up 3 inches, so this is where it's going to sit. Now we're going to have a small hinge right here, which is going to go off of the 2nd rack. And then since this is a big open area right here, I know this is going to want to bend, especially since I'm going to be building another rack on top of this, and the hinge is going to be on the back side. So once the weight of the bed wants to go up like this, this whole piece right here is going to want to fold down. So I'm going to have to add some, probably an X brace in there, and then try and do sort of an angle iron style brace all the way around. Probably do the same material if I have any left over, and just weld it to the center of it standing up. That way it'll keep it from trying to bend down. But right now I just have to cut this down, because this rack is about 6 inches more narrow than the other racks, since I'm going to have the other 2 filler pieces in here. So the rack is going to be technically a little smaller. It's just going to be a lot longer. So I'm going to have to cut this down. And then right here, I'm gonna have to cut in order for it to clear the frame, since the frame of the truck is going to sit right here. So I don't want to cut it all the way back over here like I did on the other ones, because this one, with this little bit of angle iron being right here, it'll help the way, especially how I was referring to, all the weight is going to be on this, pushing it up. If I were to cut this all out, then essentially all that would be holding this would be just this bottom piece, which would be a 1/2 inch by 3 piece, a flat piece on top that could fold right about here. So if I do have this little bit of angle iron, it'll keep this from folding, since the angle iron will definitely keep it a little stronger. Because the way it sits right now, it would be pretty much impossible to bend this angle iron right here, especially if it's like this. You're never going to bend 3 inches going this way. But if I cut all this out and I just leave the bottom piece, it's going to be pretty easy to bend that and shear it off. Now that we have the outer structure of the 3rd stage, now is where the fun starts to kind of start happening. Now we're going to start building the 4th stage. I understand a 3-stage perfectly fine. All you have is a dump side, super simple. I already have that done. It took me about a day's worth of work to get there. However, this is where I get a little stumbled, because it's hard to fit 4 stages into 2 inches thick. And not only that, my truck is super low, and I'm not going to raise my truck because I hate the way they look super tall, and I'm all about being super low. So that's where I have issues, because I want a little bit of everything. I want it to be low, I want it to ride comfortable, I want to fit a 4-stage rack in there. I want all these things, and it's super hard to cram all that when you have such a small space. The way I'm thinking of building the 4th stage is going to have the 2 cylinders on the front side, tucked underneath, and they're going to be in a swinging motion. So when it's closed, they're going to be laying down. Once they open, they're going to swing around. Now, I've seen a couple setups like this, and they're actually pretty cool, and I like the way they're set up. However, I've never seen anyone reinforce them properly. So almost every setup that I've seen like this, the support where they're welded on always ends up getting bent down, since the two cylinders are kind of peeling it back down as it's trying to pick up the whole entire weight of the bed. So that's where I think I'm going to have some issues, but I think if I reinforce it strong enough, I should be fine. Now, I know I should kind of figure this all out from the very beginning and kind of have a plan, but right now I don't have a plan, and I've just thought about this far too much. So I'm just going to go ahead and try it, and if it doesn't work, then I'll rearrange and try something different. However, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try that same setup. I'm pretty much going to build an identical rack like the third stage, which I have down here. I just have these on top. And this is where the cylinders are going to get mounted, but underneath with little eyelid tabs. Now, in order to keep this from bending down in the center, I'm going to add a flat piece under here pretty much. I'm going to make this an angle iron, but instead of being a 3x3 angle iron, it's going to be a 3x1 or 1.5 angle iron. Even though it's not technically an angle iron, but just so you guys kind of understand what I'm talking about. So I'm going to get a flat piece, and I'm going to weld it to the bottom of this. That way it has a harder time trying to bend that down, since there's a flat piece, and it's going to be trying to fold down a 1.5 inch thick piece versus a 1/2 inch material. So I think that'll definitely strengthen it up a little. Plus, if I add some corner gussets that are welded from here to here, it'll have a hard time peeling this down, since it'll try to pull away as it peels down. And if it's welded from here to here, it's going to have to pull this whole brace in order to peel it down. But if it's welded here and here, it's going to have a hard time trying to pull that weld off. And I'd like to think that's the best possible way, but honestly, like I keep saying, it's super hard to kind of try and build this off the truck. Now, ideally, you'd want to have the bed off the truck and place everything down and make sure everything works and it clears the drive shaft and all that stuff. But where I live in a neighborhood, and I don't want to have my bed off my truck for multiple days at a time. And it's a struggle taking my bed on and off every single time by myself. So that's why I kind of just want to build the outer structure of the stages, tack them all in place, hinge them all, and then put them on the truck, and then see what hits and what doesn't, and see if it's going to clear, and kind of go from there. Now, I know it's not the best way to do it, but it's how I'm able to do it, and I think it'll be fine at the end of the day. I'm also going to be running 8-inch cylinders for every stage, but I think for the last stage, in order to get close to 90 degrees or 90 degrees, which is what my goal is off the fourth stage, I think I'm going to need 10-inch cylinders. Now that we have the outer frame of this fourth stage, now we can go ahead and start beveling everything so we could tack everything. This right here is a 15/16 solid round stock, and then on the outside this is a 1.5 inch DOM 1/4 wall thickness. Now, a lot of people just run a mild steel tube, which is honestly fine. However, the DOM does not have a seam like the other tubes. So all the tubes that are out there, the way they're made is essentially a flat piece, and they're kind of curled up, and then they're welded. And if you look at them, they have a seam that goes, or a weld that goes down the center, and on the inside they have a little seam. And the seam, it kind of touches on the inside. It kind of hangs down a little bit, so it makes you have to run a smaller inner diameter tube, which gives you more slop from the side to side. And then eventually, when that seam gets worn out, then you have a pretty sloppy finish. However, this doesn't have a seam since it is DOM. I completely forgot what DOM stands for right now, but essentially what it stands for is a solid tube like this, which is what is used in every single roll cage, unless you're using like chromoly or stuff like that. But this is popular in the roll cage or the race car world because it doesn't have that seam, so it's less likely to split. On top of all that, I'm also going to be drilling and tapping the DOM tube in order to install some Zerk fittings. That way I can grease my hinges, because I know everyone out there does not grease their hinges. They run them dry, and eventually from all the metal to metal contact, they end up getting worn out and they just oval themselves out. A little bit of grease in there will make these hinges last a lot longer. Now I'm going to start to tack up the racks, get them all squared, and just get the frames tack welded. That way I could lay them on top of each other and measure out my hinge setup. This is kind of where we're at right now. Everything is tacked in place, but I'm working on the third stage, which is this one. I have to clean this all up, but you can kind of get an idea of how it's gonna all be laid out. So since I made this one 6 inches more narrower than the other racks, and I did that on purpose, I'm gonna add this filler piece, which is what I've been using this whole time, 1/2 by 3, and I'm gonna weld this to the side right here. That way I can weld my hinge to the outside, and that way I could center this rack with the other ones. So the way I'm gonna make these is I'm gonna cut them at 5 inches, and I'm probably gonna do half, obviously half on the rack, half on the truck, or half on the previous rack and half on the next rack. This 5-inch piece right here is gonna get welded to the truck. The next 5 inches is gonna get welded to the frame. The next 5 inches is gonna get welded to the truck, and the next 5 inches is gonna get welded to the frame, so on and so forth. The way we're going to lock this in is with that solid tube. We're going to slide it on the inside, and we're going to put a couple tacks on the solid 15/16 round stock. That way it won't slide in, and same, we'll do that on the opposite side so it won't slide out. If we ever need to take them off, we just grind the welds away, hammer it in, and we'll be able to take the racks off. Alright, well, I'm just about ready to weld the frames. Now, I originally wanted to tack the hinges on and get everything situated, but regardless, the racks need to be welded, and if something is wrong, I'm gonna have to cut it off and fix it. I've been making some pretty good progress. I have most of the frames for the stages welded up. Now I just have to do the last one, which is technically the third stage. I have to weld all of this in. This is where the hinge is going to be, and then weld the top side everywhere. So thankfully it's the weekend. I'm already out of work and I have a little bit of daylight left, so I can get some daylight welding in. So I'm going to try to get as much progress as I can today, and we're just going to keep going until we finish this thing. The racks are now welded up, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut all of my hinge material, tack all my hinges on all of the stages, so I can pretty much have the full stage done and set up right here. Once I do that, then I'll figure out where I need to brace and what I need to do, because I already have an idea of where I'm going to brace, but I still don't know where the cylinders are going to be mounted exactly. I know that they're going to be mounted on my angle iron, I just don't know exactly where I want them. So that's why I'm going to hinge everything and then play with it, you know, open it and close it. I have the first, second, and third stage hinged. Now, like I said, they're only tacked, so I'm not going to weld them until they're on the truck and I have all of the stages all hinged and ready to go. Tomorrow, I'm going to hinge the fourth stage, which is going to go on the front over here. And then I'm not going to hinge the first stage. I know I technically said it is hinged, but it's not. I'm not going to hinge the first one, which is the dump, until I put it on the truck, because right now obviously it doesn't make any sense to hinge it. So far we're looking pretty good. that's gonna wrap up this video. Now, I wasn't too sure how I was going to kind of film everything and put it together in a series, but I feel like right now is a pretty good time to stop since I have filmed a lot of actual footage. I think so far I'm at like 3 hours of footage that I have to cut down into whatever you guys are watching. So a lot of the footage has to get cut down, and I really want to show as much as I can. That way, if anyone wants to try this at home, or has a buddy that has a shop or something like that, you guys can get as much detail as possible, because I know it's pretty hard with racks like this. I've talked to a lot of people and I've tried asking for pictures and videos and how they did everything, and they don't have any of it because this is all old school stuff. Most of them just kind of explain it by mouth or by word, which is kind of confusing sometimes. So I think it's better to show everything, that way you guys can understand everything that goes into it. Now right now I'm actually trying to figure out the placement for my cylinders, and back to the beginning of what I was talking about. Now I am not going to be able to get 90 degrees out of every stage, but like I had mentioned, I'm going to try to get as much articulation as I can with 8-inch cylinders. Now if I ran a 10-inch or even a 12-inch or something different, I can get a lot more and probably even get more than 90 degrees out of each stage. However, I'm also fighting a lot of space because my truck is very low. So since my truck is low, I can't really have a 10-inch cylinder hanging down because I'm just going to rip it off. And I know some people are going to say to raise it up, and the plan eventually is to put hydraulics on the suspension so I could, lift it and lower it. But for now, I'm just going to drive it static just the way it is, because I've already spent a lot of money on just this rack setup alone, so I don't have much money to be throwing at the suspension. So I'm trying to figure this out. I think I got a pretty good idea, but I don't want to weld anything or gusset anything or add any supports until the rack is on the truck. So I think right now what I'm going to do is the way you guys see it done in the video. Everything is, the hinges are tacked on and just the outer frames are welded. I'm going to put it on the truck this upcoming weekend when I get some time. I think I should have enough time. Once we have everything, I can weld everything and throw it on the truck, bolt the bed onto the 4th stage, and just have it be like that. I could have no hydraulics, no nothing, just have the rack sitting there. The bed's not going to come up because it's a lot of weight holding it down, and it'll be fine. I could drive it like that for a while, and if I go to shows, I could manually lift it up and prop the bed up in a dump position, which I might do for the time being. But my goal is to try and get some hydraulics plumbed and make some tabs and everything to get all the hydraulics mounted. Now I already made a small mistake on the dump on where I was going to mount my cylinders, because once again I'm not building it on the truck, so it's hard to not run into issues of clearance. And that's kind of what I did, is I didn't calculate it right. I didn't think how narrow the frame was, and it kind of bit me in the ass. So now what I'm going to try to do is, once I get the rack on the bed, I'll try and kind of rework it or figure something else out so I can get the cylinders mounted. And same with the 2nd stage, which is the diamond position that goes to the side. I'm also trying to figure out how to mount that one without hitting the frame, because the frame I only have 33 inches from the inside to the inside, so it's not a lot of space. My problem is it's easy to just mount everything. However, I'm trying to get a lot of articulation out of just 8-inch cylinders, and that's kind of what is my struggle. Is I want a small cylinder to open 90 degrees, and that's where the struggle is. But it's definitely doable. It's just a lot of planning and measuring and doing a lot of that. Right now, I can't really do that without having the racks be on the bed or on the truck and seeing if it's going to hit anything. So, for example, if I were to mount my cylinder sideways like this past the frame, my stage already is outside of the frame, so that would be in the frame. That's obviously not doable. So if I put it in here where it clears the frame, it's good. However, it's an 8-inch cylinder, so if I put it all the way on the inside, I'm only going to get like 20 degrees, which is only going to be about that much. And obviously I want it the more it opens, the higher it'll bring the bed up. So that's kind of what I'm fighting with. And I think this is a good time to cut this clip, make this maybe like a part 1 series, and then just keep going. And then once I feel like I have a decent amount of footage, then I'll cut that and then just keep doing it until I finish this whole entire bed. My goal is to have the bed up in the air by itself, doing its thing by the end of the year. So I think it's doable. I have about a month, so I think it's definitely a lot of time. However, I only have a couple of hours a day. With all that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I hope you guys are excited for the bed rack videos to keep coming. Now, if any of you guys or any OGs are watching this, you guys have any tips, please put it down in the comment section. That way I can learn off of it, and that way everyone watching the video can learn off of them as well. And even if you're not an OG and you just have some sort of knowledge that you'd like to kind of share with me or anyone watching the video. For example, these welds, if you think there is a stronger way to weld these, definitely put it in the comment section below. I know I really would have liked to cut them at a 45 and weld them at a 45. More weld, more surface area. However, I don't have the proper equipment to cut a 45, and if I did, it would just take me forever. I already spent like 2 weeks just cutting all this material, which honestly sucked. But if you guys have any tips, definitely put it down in the comment section below. Please, please, please. It'll help me out, and it'll help everyone watching this video out. With all that being said, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out, guys.